So I want to pick up in August the 12th, 1912. This is volume 11. And we're talking about the love of God. And when Jesus talks about the love of God, he gives the symbol of the sun, because the sun is the source of life on the earth. It's the source of light. It makes us all happy and all the rest of it. And when we can't see the sun shining, we all get grumpy. So the sun actually affects us hugely. So Luisa says, this morning my always lovable Jesus came for just a little, and he told me, my daughter, my love is symbolized by the sun. The sun rises majestically, but while it rises, it is always fixed, and it never rises, if you know what I mean. It's the earth that's moving around the sun that gives us the rising and the setting of the sun. With its light, it invades all of the earth, not just one part of it. With its heat, it fertilizes. The word fecundates, I think, is awful. It fertilizes all plants. Now notice the all and the everything. This is why it's a good symbol of God, because God loves everyone. He gives life to everyone. He redeems everyone. He sanctifies everyone who allows him to do it. One could say there's almost no good on the earth which does not come from its beneficial influence. How many things would not have life without it? And yet it does everything without clamour, unlike human beings. Without saying even a word, without demanding anything. So there's the image of the sun as the great giver. The great giver. That's why it can symbolize God. It gives no bother to anyone. On the contrary, it does not even take up any space on the earth, which in turn it invades with its light. Humanity can do whatever it wants with it. In other words, you can shut the sun out, or you can go out and let it burn you up. Even more, while they enjoy the good of the sun, they pay no attention to it. That's very interesting. The sun is so presumed that we pay no attention to it unless something goes wrong. And it's exactly the position that we have with God. Everybody needs God, but most of them pay no attention to him whatsoever. I'm just giving you the parallels that he's trying to say here about himself. And they keep it in their midst unobserved. Now, that is the way it is with my love, or with divine love, symbolized by the sun. Like the majestic sun, it rises in the midst of all. There's no mind which is not irradiated by my light. There's no heart which does not feel my heat. There's no soul, look at that, which is not embraced by my love. That's terribly important if you're praying for people, to realize that the divine love embraces everyone. More than the sun, I am in the midst of all, but how few pay attention to me. I remain almost unobserved in their midst. I am not requited, that is, they don't respond. And yet I continue to give light, heat, and love. If some soul pays attention to me, I go mad. You'd have to add with joy. You'd have to add the words with joy, because going mad is not actually what is being said. I go mad with joy. In other words, I am delighted. I go mad with joy, but without clamour. Because being solid, fixed, truthful, my love is not subject to weakness. Now, my book has weaknesses. Knock out the ES, which is not English. You see, Italian words are either plural or singular, and an awful lot of their plural words are translated as weaknesses, but weakness is a plural word. Do you know what I mean? Just so would I like your love for me, he says. Our love for him, therefore, is to be solid, fixed, truthful, and not subject to weakness, okay? And if it were so, you too would become the sun for me and for everyone, because true love possesses all the qualities of the sun. Now he's now talking, this paragraph, he's talking about our love. In the last paragraph, he was talking about divine love. Okay. On the other hand, a love which is not solid, fixed, truthful, is symbolized by earthly fire, which has many variations. Its light is not capable of illuminating everyone, because if you have a fire in one room, you don't see it in the next one. It is a very gloomy light mixed with smoke. Its heat is limited, and if it's not fed with wood, it dies down and turns to ash. And if the wood is green, it splutters and smokes, naturally, because it has to dry the wood. Such are the souls that are not completely for me. Oh, boys. Now, just look what we've just read about the smoky stuff, not giving proper light and can't be seen by everybody. So that's the love that's not divinized. Okay, make sure you have that in the margin. Love that's not divinized. Okay. Just what love not divinized is what is being described here. And you see, if you see divine love and you see love that's not divinized, it actually helps you to make a decision. Such are the souls that are not completely for me as my true lovers. Now, Jesus usually identifies his true lovers as victim souls, people completely given to him. That doesn't mean there aren't other saints, but just in these writings, it appears that the lovers are the victim souls. If they do a little bit of good, it is more clamour and smoke that comes out of their actions than light. If they're not fed with some human bother, even under the aspect of sanctity or of conscience, they lie down and become colder than ash. In other words, if there isn't a little bit in it for themselves, oh dear. Their characteristic is inconstancy. Now it's fire and now it's ash. We would say one day on, one day off. Okay, so it's just not constant. So divine love, that's God's love towards us, is constant. Our love in the divine will must be constant for him as well. So August the 14th, 1912, we're going to be talking about self-forgetfulness again. And you need to put a VIP on it. Very important. Jesus said, my daughter, in order to forget herself, the soul should make it in such a way that everything she does, you underline the everything. Instead of some things, everything she does, and which is necessary to her, she does it as if I myself want to do it in her. Now that's one of the instructions you get frequently in the divine will, that if you're having lunch, you're having lunch with Jesus. Okay. If you're driving your car, you're driving your car with Jesus. If you're going to bed, you're going to bed with him. If you're getting up, you're getting up with him. If you're going to church, you're going to church with him, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely everything. You're doing it with him. It's a he and I relationship. Okay. If she prays, she should say, it is Jesus who wants to pray. Now that will change your prayer, won't it? Mm-hmm. Just simply to say that it's Jesus who wants to pray. Now, if Jesus wants to pray, he will be praying for everybody, won't he? Yeah. He won't just be praying for the ones we want. And I pray together with her, he said. If she has to work, it's Jesus who wants to work. It is Jesus who wants to walk. It's Jesus who wants to take food, who wants to sleep, who wants to get up, and so on. And so with all the other things. Only in this way can the soul forget herself. In other words, you're thinking of somebody else. Now, notice how personal this is. You see, there are billions of people on the planet who have religion, whatever the religion is. It's a totally different matter to have a relationship with God. A relationship with God is spirituality. Religion is that you attend functions and you believe certain things and you agree with certain things. So it's spirituality that allows you to have the self-forgetfulness. So only in this way can the soul forget herself, because she will do everything not only because I want it, but because I myself want to do it. It is necessary precisely to me. Now, Luisa said, one day I was working and I thought to myself, how can it be that while I am working, it's Jesus who works in me? So she's asking a question that is necessary for us, not for herself. Because don't forget, she has had 3 spiritual marriages. She's at the highest place that a person can be in relationship with God. And a question like this is not necessary for a person at that level. But because she is the first to live in divine will, she is prompted to ask everything that all her followers are going to need answered. Is that okay? So Jesus said, I myself and my fingers are in yours. Now that's John 14, 20 to 21. You in me and I in you. So he's trying to give a graphic picture of what the Lord living in us looks like. My daughter, when I was on the earth, did my hands not lower themselves to work with wood, to hammer the nails, and to help my foster father, Joseph? There's your confirmation that he was a carpenter. While I was doing that, and with those very hands and with those fingers, I created souls and called other souls back to life. Okay, so there he is, and letting St. Joseph teach him how to make a chair, and at the same time he's creating souls and judging souls at the same time. I always remember, I think it was a meditation of Dom Marmion, the famous Dom Marmion, on the cradle at Christmas, and he was saying that when you look at the infant absolutely helpless in the crib, please remember that he is maintaining the world, the universe. Otherwise it will disintegrate, and he's creating souls and he's judging souls that are coming back to him, even though you are looking at a helpless infant. And it's to see the 2 levels, it's quite amazing. So here he says it himself. In the movements of my fingers, I called in sequence all the movements of your fingers and those of others. Because he has told us, this is volume 11, and he will tell us more as we go along, that he has drawn all souls into himself, and that he, he made a divine version of each one of our lives, and that is the fullness to which you can actually reach. So he has worked through all your fingers, and he walks through your toes, and he looks through your eyes, and he listens in your ears, and he speaks through your mouth. We just need to be more aware of that, and our standard will go up. We need to be very much aware of it. So in the movements of my fingers, I called in sequence all the movements of your fingers and those of others. And if I saw that they were doing them for me, because I wanted to do within them, then look at this now. The consequence, if you do it consciously, I continued my life of Nazareth in them. Because all the small things you do at home is the hidden life in Nazareth, okay? Your Nazareth and his. And I felt as though cheered by them for the sacrifices and the humiliations of my hidden life, giving them the merit of my life. That is the wonderful thing, that when we become aware and unite everything that we think, say or do with everything that he thought, said and did, then all our thoughts, words and actions actually gain his merits. That's what you need. And then say, Lord, I also want to lift this up into the divine will, so that all souls, past, present and future, can benefit now that I know I can do this with my actions. Daughter, he said, the hidden life that I conducted in Nazareth is not taken into consideration by men. That's because people don't understand it. When in fact, after my passion, I could not have done a greater good for them, because he tells us elsewhere that it was in the hidden life in Nazareth that he created the divine version of each one of us. By lowering myself to all those acts, little and lowly, those acts which men do in their daily lives, like eating and sleeping and drinking and working and I love the starting the fire. He did that for his mother, you see. Sweeping, look at that. You'd never associate him with sweeping, would you? All acts which no one can do without. So that they're normal, they're necessary. I made a divine little coin. Now we call this divine currency. And you'll hear more about divine currency as you go on in these writings. I made a divine little coin of incalculable value flow in their hands. So we can call on that, you see, when we unite our stuff with Jesus. So, if my passion redeemed them, my hidden life provided each human action, even the most insignificant one, with divine merit and infinite value. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah. Do you see, he said, while you work. Now, the work that Luisa did was embroidery, and she taught other girls how to embroider. Working because I want to work, my fingers flow in yours. And that's why he's talking about fingers, because she's doing embroidery. While I work in you in this very instant, how many am I bringing to this light with my creative hands? So while I'm helping you with your embroidery, isn't that incredible? I'm also bringing souls into life. How many others am I calling back? How many others do I sanctify, correct, chastise, etc.? Now you are with me, creating, calling, correcting, and so forth. Now the bit that we find difficult to get, we can understand that, okay, I can unite my actions with his and take on his divine merits. The bit that people are slower to get is that once I unite with him and he's working through me, then he's creating and doing everything through me as well. And therefore I'm doing it through him, because you're either one or you're not. Isn't that amazing? Look at it. Now, because of this, that's the now, because of this, you are with me, creating, calling, that's calling souls back to him, correcting, and so forth. Therefore, just as you are not alone, neither am I alone in my working. Could I give you a greater honour? Now, beside that, put we, us. We dash us. In other words, everything is we, not me, and it's us. And Luisa said, well, who can say what I understood? And the good that we can do to ourselves and to others by doing things because Jesus wants us to do them. You see, there's the motivation, because Jesus wants them done. Okay. My mind gets lost, she said. So that's thinking about Jesus. So August the 6th, if you think about yourself, it's going to be a disaster. Okay, we're going to have a couple of messages on this. So August the 16th, 1912, thinking about oneself blinds the mind. Thinking only of Jesus is light for the mind. Okay. And before I even go any further, I want to give you John 3:30. John 3:30. He must increase and I must decrease. Okay. And so Jesus said, my daughter, the thought of yourselves blinds your minds. It forms a sort of human enchantment. In other words, you get wrapped up in yourself. And this human enchantment forms a net around man. This net is made of weakness, knock out the S's, weakness, oppression, melancholy, and fear. Now, they are three very powerful things to bring us down. Weakness, oppression, melancholy, and fear. And of everything evil contained in human nature. And the more one thinks about oneself, even under the aspect of good. Now, even under the aspect of good is the scrupulosity that you've heard him talk about in the volumes up to now. Just put scrupulosity there beside it. Scruples. The thicker the net becomes and the blinder the soul. So the more you take your selfies, the less you will ever see him. Because to me, the image of self-idolatry is frightening. I hate to see anybody doing it. On the other hand, not thinking of oneself, but thinking only of the Lord and only of loving the Lord, whatever the circumstance, is light for the mind. Now, this is light instead of darkness, and forms a sweet divine enchantment. So you're wrapped up in God and not wrapped up in yourself. Now, wrapped up in yourself is called narcissism, if you can spell such a big word. Narcissism. Okay. So being wrapped up in God is divine love, is love for God. Okay, just put love down. So you get involved in a sweet divine enchantment, this divine enchantment also forms its net, but this net is all made of light, fortitude, joy, and trust. In sum, of all the goods which I myself possess. And the less one thinks about oneself, the thicker that net becomes, to the point that one no longer recognises oneself. Now, I'm up in volume 16 on a Wednesday night, and Luisa is saying, I don't recognise myself. Yeah. How beautiful it is to see the soul wrapped in this net, which the divine enchantment has woven. How delightful, gracious, and dear to all heaven. The opposite for the soul who thinks about themselves. Okay, so on August the 17th, 1912, we just have 2 sentences about the thought of yourself actually makes your soul smaller. Now, smaller means you have less capacity for love. You have less capacity for wisdom. You have less capacity for grace, and therefore it's dangerous. My daughter, the thought of oneself makes the soul smaller. And from her smallness she measures my greatness, almost wanting to constrain me. On the other hand, one who does not think of herself by thinking of me expands. Now there's something that's vital for the higher volumes. Expands within my immensity and renders me the honour due to me. Now, as we go on, the Lord is going to put in this is called a seed message, and then he develops it. And he's going to say to us that to truly live in the divine will, the Lord has to expand your soul more and more and more to be able to actually take what he's giving you. Is that okay? So thinking of yourself makes that impossible because the soul actually gets smaller. So August the 20th, 1912, Jesus is close to the soul, waiting for her to call him to do what she does, call him to do what she does together with her. Okay, what that is saying very simply is that we still have our free will. Even though we tell the Lord endlessly, we hand our free will over to him, he will never, ever, ever invade us. In other words, if I forget to invite him to come and participate in some action, he stays outside of it. And he says, she doesn't want me in this. And I may only have forgotten. So if you're inclined to forget, as my age group is inclined to forget, then I say to my guardian angel, listen, will you ever be my alarm clock? Nudge me. Don't let me forget. Don't let me forget. Don't let me forget. Because if I do forget to invite him in to actually do this, then he's not going to do it. Okay? So continuing, Jesus told Luisa, my daughter, how sorry I feel in seeing the soul huddled within herself. That's all wrapped up in herself. And seeing her operating by herself. Now, operating by herself is with the human will only. This is us forgetting to invite him, you see. I'm close to her. I look at her, and seeing that many times she's unable to do well what she does, I wait for her to call me. Do you see what a gentleman the Lord is? Mm. Now, if Satan got half an inkling that you were interested, he'd dive in, leave you no freedom whatsoever. So I wait for her to call me, and I say, I want to do this thing, but I'm unable to do it. Come and do it together with me. Remember John 15:5, without me you can do nothing. Do you remember that? Yeah. And we just have to keep remembering it. And also remember that Jesus has said to us elsewhere that if you desire it, I'll do it. But you've actually got to tell him you want it. Okay. And so we've got to go and say, Lord, I want to do this thing, but I'm unable to do it. Come and do it together with me, and I will do everything well. For example, I want to love. Come to love together with me. Wouldn't that be divine? Mm-hmm. I want to pray. Come and pray together with me. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Mm-hmm. I want to make this sacrifice. Come and give me your strength, for I feel weak. And so with everything else. Now, beside that, you put Philippians 4:13. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things in Christ who gives me the strength. Without him, I can do nothing. Okay. And so with everything else. Gladly and with the greatest delight, I would offer myself for everything. Now, notice the Lord is offering himself to serve us. Isn't that a little frightening? He's offering to actually work for us or to serve us. I'm like a teacher who, having assigned an essay to his pupil, remains close to the student to see how he does. Unable to do well, the pupil becomes worried, worked up and upset. You know all about that. And he may even cry. But he doesn't say, Master, teach me and show me how to do it. That's the mistake that the student is making. What is not the mortification of the teacher in seeing himself treated like a nothing by this student? He said, that's the situation I'm in. Isn't that interesting? Now, it is said man proposes and God disposes. As soon as the soul proposes to do some good, to be holy, immediately I dispose her for the things which are needed. Now notice, if you want something, the Lord immediately gives you what the church calls prevenient. Can you just knock that off? The church gives you what is called prevenient grace. Okay. So I give her what she needs: light, grace, knowledge of me, and I also give her stripping. Now, what's the stripping? The stripping is taking away. You want something, he knows there's something blocking your ability to do it, and so he makes sure that's taken away. And if I do not achieve the purpose with these, then by dint of mortifications I allow nothing to be lacking to her in order to give her what she has proposed. So you say to the Lord, I want to do something. He knows there's something in you that's actually blocking it. So you'll get pushes and shoves and, little bits of mortification and that. And what he's doing is taking away the block between you wanting something and you actually achieving it. You have experienced, I'm sure, that whenever you try to do something for God, that you get all kinds of opposition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can talk about that later. Yeah. Okay. He said, how many escape by force from amid this crafting that my love has woven for them. Few are those who persist to allow me to accomplish my work. That's Philippians 1:6. The Lord will finish a job you ask him to do. So August the 28th, 1912, we're come back to talking about love again, because you hear me saying all the time that the summary of the 36 volumes is divine will and love. So if we don't master the love, we don't master the divine will. It is love that transforms the soul in God, but it wants to find her emptied of everything. So, continue in my usual state, Jesus said, my daughter, the other virtues, as high and sublime as they may be, always cause the creature to be distinguished from her Creator. Now, what he's saying here is, if you become famous for your patience or your fortitude or whatever, people can really, point out he's the famous one, he's the victorious one or whatever. But only love is what transforms the soul in God and makes her one with him. This is why love is the only baggage you can take into heaven. Nothing else. It is love alone is what transforms the soul in God and makes her one with him. So I want to give you 1 Corinthians 13 there. 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient and kind and all the rest of it. You remember? Mm-hmm. And I want to give you Ephesians 3, 16 to 21. Founded in love, you grow in love, built in love, you come to maturity in love, and finally you're like Christ. So that's Ephesians 3, 16 to 21. Also 1 John 4, 7 and the verses following. So love alone is what triumphs over all human imperfections. And the shortest cut to sanctity is to do everything out of love. If you try to do things to be patient or to be this or to be that or the other, you'll get there, but you're on the slow boat. You're on a bike, you're not on a 747. If you do everything with the motivation of love, you're on your 747. Is that okay? So love alone is what triumphs over all human imperfections and consumes whatever prevents the soul from passing to take divine life in God. However, there cannot be true love if it does not receive life and nourishment from my will. So give yourself a little heading over this paragraph, divine will and love. They operate together. A heading over the paragraph. So you'll see what the whole paragraph is about. Divine will and love work together. You can't have one without the other. So it is my will that, united with love, forms the true transformation with me. That's your NB now beside that one. That soul is in continuous contact with my power. The power is in the divine will. With my sanctity, which is in the love, and all that I am. Therefore, she can say that she is another me, another Christ. Okay? So you put that in the margin. Another Christ. Everything is precious. Everything is sanctity for that soul. It can be said that even her breath or the contact with the ground on which she treads is precious, is holy, because these are nothing other than effects of my will. Now, you could spend a long time on this, but I'm only going to spend a short time because it's not a conference we're at. Look at what's been said here. Even the ground you walk on is holy. That is why we call Israel a holy land, because Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the apostles and the early saints all walked on it. And Jesus is saying that if somebody truly living in the divine will, really living in the divine will, the ground they walk on is holy. Now look at the effect it's going to have on the earth when more and more and more of us get into the divine will. Isn't it amazing? These are the effects of my will, he said. And then he added, oh, if all knew my love and my will, they would stop leaning on themselves and even more on others, on human supports. Human supports would in fact end. Now, stop leaning on yourself is Proverbs 3:5. Proverbs 3:5. Micah 3:11. Micah 3:11. And John 12:23. And stop leaning on others is John 5:41 and 44. John 5:41 and 44. Now, the text in John 5 is actually very interesting because Jesus is getting at the scribes and Pharisees and saying to them, but how can you possibly grow in knowledge and love of God when you're leaning on each other for everything? And you're leaning on the reputation that this man says you have. Whether that man has the right to say that or not is another subject. And he said, you're not even looking to God for anything. So it was totally down at this human level, which, as you can see, doesn't produce such a great result. Oh, how insignificant, painful, uncomfortable they will find them. All would lean only on my love, and since my love is most pure spirit and does not contain matter, they would feel so much at ease leaning within me and with the effects that I want. Okay, so I want to give you Deuteronomy 32:15. God alone was her guide. That's Deuteronomy 32:15. 15. Now, two things have been said to us in that paragraph, and that is that if you lean on human beings, you find out rather quickly that they are weak and inconstant and they can let you down and blah, blah, blah. It's not very comfortable. But if you lean on God, who is most pure spirit, nothing of this earth affects him. And so leaning on him, a true lightness of spirit comes into yourself. Okay. And also an extraordinary interior freedom. If you lean too much on human beings, what you'll find is you get more and more tied up in knots, because there's all kinds of expectations made of you and all the rest of it. Lean completely on God and you're just totally free. Now, Jesus continues, my daughter, love wants to find souls emptied of everything. Now, notice the case must be empty. Going to God, prohibited baggage is anything that is not love. Okay. Now, the biggest thing in that everything, you might, if I asked you to give me a long list, you might talk about sins and faults and blah, blah, blah. The biggest thing we have to get rid of is ego, the ego, the self. That's the biggest thing of all. Otherwise, it cannot clothe them with the garment of love. In other words, selfishness cannot bear the garment of divine love. It just cannot do it. So that's why in the early volumes we were told to do all this mortification and self-denial to get rid of the stuff that doesn't allow love to rise in us. It would be like someone who wanted to wear a suit, but that suit is stuffed inside, so he's unable to even fit into it. He can't get into it. He tries to put an arm in the sleeve, but he finds it blocked. And so the poor one is either to put it away or to make a bad impression. You certainly wouldn't make a bad impression if you tried to get into a suit and the arm was blocked. You wouldn't turn up at the wedding that way, would you?
Charlie Chaplin.
Exactly. The same with love, he said. When it wants to clothe the soul with itself, if it does not find the soul completely emptied, it withdraws. Now, there's here, I just put, oh, and an exclamation mark beside that. It completely withdraws. Okay. Now, the last thing on the planet you want is for love to withdraw. Okay. There's a very telling example of this in the book of Ezekiel, E-Z-E-K, chapter 10 and chapter 11. Ezekiel chapters 10 and 11. The people had sinned greatly against the Lord, and in chapter 10, Ezekiel describes the Spirit of God rising up from the temple, hovering over it because that was his home, and moving away. But it was one of the occasions when the nation happened to repent. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if Ireland repented? The nation actually did repent, and when the nation really repented, the Spirit of God came back and entered into the temple. And Ezekiel describes both things. So I just give you that to remind you that he really means it, you know. But for the spirit of love to leave us, that's unbelievable. Also, I'd like you to look at Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. And there, St. Paul 3 times says that God abandoned them to their filthy lusts. God abandoned them to their terrible ways. God abandoned them 3 times. That's utterly frightening. That means that the Spirit of God left them. In other words, God doesn't play games with us. So August the 31st, 1912, we're still talking about love. And love is now symbolized by a dazzling sun. We've already had God's divine love compared to the sun, haven't we? A dazzling sun defends the loving soul and keeps her safe. So Jesus said, my daughter, it happens with love symbolized by the sun. We would say it's like love symbolized by the sun. Just as to those people who can easily do their actions only as long as they keep their eyes low. For the light of the sun descends mildly into their eyes. But if they want to fix their eyes on the sun, especially if it's midday. Now, of course, this text is coming from a hot country. So whatever chance you'd have of looking at the sun 53 degrees north, you'd have none at all in these hot countries. Their sight remains dazzled and they're forced to lower them. Otherwise, they would lose the attitude of their actions. That means they'd lose their ability to see. They would have the worst of it, and they would cause no harm to the sun. It's only they themselves who would be harmed, which would continue its course with its usual majesty. Now, that's the way it happens, my daughter, to one who truly loves me. Love is more than a majestic, imposing sun for her. That's for the soul. If people look at her from afar, the light of love descends mildly into their eyes, and therefore they can plot and lay snares and speak ill of her. But as they try to approach her, to affix on her, the light of love will flash in their eyes, and they will end up moving away and no longer thinking about it. Now, that exact thing happened to Therese Newman in the First World War. She was experiencing, she was a victim soul, and she was a German, and she was experiencing the passion one day when some soldiers, or maybe people saying they were soldiers, came to the house to do some damage. And in the middle of the passion, and she bleeding from the wounds of the passion, she got up and she went downstairs and went to the front door and simply opened her arms in the shape of a cross. They saw Christ and they ran. And she saved the whole house and she saved the whole area from whatever, in war they do terrible things. So whatever they were going to do, they were all saved because of this. So that is when you try to approach this person, fix your eyes on them, the light of love, and it will flash in their eyes and they will end up moving away. That's exactly what happened to Therese. And the loving soul will continue her course without even thinking about whether they are looking at her or not. Yeah, Therese went back upstairs into bed and continued the passion. No discussion on the subject. Because she knows that love will defend her in everything and will keep her safe. Okay. Now, Therese Newman, 20th century, go back to I think it's the 11th century with St. Clare of Assisi. When they were attacked, she's in northern Italy, they were attacked by the Saracens, the Muslims of the time, and Clare and her nuns, of course, were completely defenceless, and the Saracens came right up to the gate of the convent, and Clare walked out carrying the Blessed Sacrament before her, and she just simply stood before a whole army carrying the Blessed Sacrament, that's all. And they turned around and went away. And she saved the whole lot of them. But it's what they saw in her. They wouldn't have been able to perceive the Blessed Sacrament. But of course, she was praying that the Lord would bless them. It's fantastic. So September the 2nd, 1912, the harm of self-reflections. Now, we would call that introversion for a soul who loves Jesus. So Jesus said, my daughter, I cannot leave you because you do not reflect on yourself. In other words, you have no turning back into yourself. Nor do you have any concern for yourself. For one who truly loves me, introversion is the word we would use, self-concern, even in good things, are many voids that she forms in love. Why? Because you're now interested in yourself. You've turned completely away from divine love. And therefore my life cannot fill the soul completely. Now, we've had a quiet disaster in Ireland and in the Western world over the past 30 to 40, maybe longer years, with the arrival of non-directive counselling, where people charge huge fees for a person to talk round and round and round and round and round a problem, and that's all that's going on is human talk, and they're not directed towards any solution. And I know people who have committed suicide as a result. And I know people who have said, I was raped in my mind, I was not left even a private thought. And people who operated in this way did not realise the damage they were doing. It was a very insidious attack on the church as well as on the world. And it's this thing that you're reflecting in on yourself and going over and over and over. You know that the more you meditate on a problem, the bigger it gets. And if you're trying to find ways to forgive somebody and you're reflecting on all their faults, forget about it, you won't forgive them. You'll only forgive them by looking at Jesus on the cross. And that's where you get the power, and it comes to forgive. So we can talk about this later. So all of this introversion and self-concerns, even in good, are many voids that she forms in love. Therefore, my life cannot fill the soul completely, and it's that love that would enable you to solve the problems. I am as though put aside. Now, in all this non-directive counselling, God is deliberately put aside, whether the counsellor is a Christian or not. I'm put in a corner, and they give me the occasion to make my little withdrawals. On the other hand, if one is not prone to reflections on her own concerns, but thinks only of loving me, she takes care of me and I fill her completely. Matthew 6:33. Matthew 6:33. So Jesus says, if you give me a chance to be creator and redeemer, I'll do it. And if you give me a chance to be saviour and sanctifier, I'll do that as well. And if you give me the even greater chance to divinize you, that's what I'm here for. But we're the ones who stop what God can do. There's not one point in her life in which she does not find me. There's nothing in your life in which you cannot touch God. Nothing. You'll say, but you know, some things happened and I wouldn't want to touch them. He'll touch them because he's healer, he's teacher, he's redeemer, he's absolutely everything. There's nothing that he can't touch. There's not one point in her life in which she does not find me. And if I wanted to make my little withdrawals, I would have to destroy myself, which would never be. So it means that we're simply putting him aside because we can only exist because the divine will maintains us in existence. Okay, so the next paragraph is about rationalizing, psychology, self-help, blah, blah, all the dangers that have happened since the 1960s. My daughter, if souls knew how harmful this rationalizing is, they bend the soul, they lower her, they cause her to keep her face turned inward. And the more they look at themselves, the more human they become. Will you put a little note in the margin, less divine? More human means less divine. Or less spiritual, whichever way you want to put it. The more they reflect, the more they feel their miseries and they become miserable. I call that meditating on the problem, and it gets worse. On the other hand, thinking only of me, of loving me, of being all abandoned in me, makes the soul straight. In other words, you get sorted out. And by keeping their faces turned to look at me alone, they rise and they grow. That's 2 Corinthians 3:18. 2 Corinthians 3:18. You become what you worship. So the more we contemplate God, the more God-like we become. That's 2 Corinthians 3:18. The more they look at me, the more divine they become. And the more they reflect on me, the richer, the stronger, and the more courageous they feel. So my response to that is all eyes on Jesus. And then he added, my daughter, the souls who are united with my will, that's living in the divine will, who allow me to carry out my life within them and to think only of loving me, are united to me like rays to the sun. That's very important. A ray comes from the sun. And a ray carries the power of the sun to the earth. So if we are living in the divine will, he says that we are like rays of his love and power going out to the earth. Isn't that fantastic? Who forms the rays? Who gives them life? It's the sun. If the sun were unable to form its rays, it could not extend its light and its heat. So the rays help the sun to do its course, and they make it more beautiful. That's our connection. That's our mission, is to give Jesus the arms to work and the feet to go somewhere and the tongue to speak and the eyes to see and so on, and a heart to love. The same for me. Though through these rays alone, which form one single thing with me, I extend myself over all regions, giving light, grace and heat, and I feel more embellished than if I had no rays. So through people living in the divine will, the light that Jesus wants to send to the earth goes everywhere on the earth. Do you remember what he said about the sun? It's fantastic. Now, one can ask a sun's ray how many courses it has made, how much light and how much heat it has given. If it had reason, it would answer, I don't want to bother about this. The sun knows, and that's enough. That's exactly how you hear victim souls talking, and Luisa talks that way as well. Only, if I had more lands in which to give light and heat, I would do it, because the sun that gives me life can reach everywhere. Now, that's fantastic. That's the answer. Not how much good have you done, just show me where I can shine my light and I'll shine it. So for that I want to give you Matthew 5. Matthew 5, 14 to 16. That's let your light shine so that men will see it and give glory to their Father in heaven. Now, one could, but if that ray wanted to reflect and to look back at what it did, it would lose its course and it would actually become dark, because its light is not its own. Its light is the light of the sun, and so it's only alive as long as it's connected with the sun. Such are the souls, my lovers. They are my living rays. They do not reflect on what they do. They are intent to remain in the divine sun. Philippians 3:14. Philippians 3:14, Paul says that we are running to complete the race and to grasp the prize for which Christ Jesus grasped us. All are intent to remain in the divine sun, and if they wanted to reflect, it would happen to them as to the sun's rays. They would lose so much. So, September the 6th, 1912. The ones who experience the benefits of having Jesus close to themselves. So Jesus said, my daughter, I am with souls inside and outside of them. Think of that now. Try and picture yourself that Jesus is all around you, outside and inside. But who experiences the effects of this? It's one who comes close to my will with his will, one who tries to live in the divine will. One who calls me, who prays, and who knows my power and the good that I can do to him. That's a beautiful piece, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's like a person who has water in his home and he doesn't go near it to get a drink. Even if there is water, he does not enjoy the benefit of it and burns with thirst. In the same way, if he is cold, even though there's a fire there, he does not go near the fire to get warm. He will not enjoy the benefit of its heat and all the rest. What is not my sorrow, as I want to give, but there's no one who wants to take. Isn't that interesting? That's a beautiful piece there. Yeah. So, September the 29th, 1912. Who is the soul most favoured by Jesus? Jesus is the one who disposes the intentions of the soul who lives in his will. Look at how important that is. So Luisa said, I'm writing of past things. I was thinking to myself, the Lord spoke to some saints, you have to add, about his passion. He spoke to some other saints about his heart, and to others about his cross and many other things. I would like to know who has been most favoured by Jesus. And Jesus said, my daughter, do you know who has been the most favoured by me? It is the soul to whom I have manifested the prodigies of the power of my most divine will. That's Luisa herself. Now, Luisa wasn't expecting that answer. All other things are paths to me, are parts of me. But my will is the centre, the life, the ruler of everything. My will directed my passion. That's terribly important to remember that. It wasn't the Jews, and it wasn't Pilate, and it wasn't anybody else who thought they were doing it. My will directed my passion. That's why Jesus said to Pilate, you'd have no power over me if it wasn't given to you from above. My will directed my passion, gave life to my heart, and exalted my cross. Now, if you read the part of the Hours of the Passion where Jesus picks up the cross, you get a great insight into that. Yeah. My will encompasses everything, captures everything, and gives effect to everything. Therefore, my will is more than anything. As a consequence, the one to whom I have spoken about my will, she has been the most favoured among everyone and above everything. Now, I'm sure the priests reading that were fascinated. How much you should thank me for having admitted you to the secrets of my volition. Even more, one who is in my will is my passion, she is my heart, she is my cross, and she is my very redemption. Notice I emphasise the is, otherwise you mightn't have got it. There's nothing dissimilar between myself and her. So now you can see what union means. Yeah. Therefore, in my will, I want the whole of you. If you want to take part in all my goods. So I want to put Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 10 there. The Lord will not accept a divided heart. But if you look at any pair of lovers, human lovers, they will not accept a divided heart either, will they? Mm-hmm. The only thing that is tolerable is that person gives themselves completely to you and you give yourself completely to them. Otherwise, what should be heaven will become purgatory or hell. Am I speaking the truth? Mm-hmm. Another time, Luisa said, I was thinking about what would be the best way to offer our actions and our prayers, whether they are reparations as adorations, etc. Oh yeah, whether you should offer them as reparations or adorations or whatever. And Jesus said, this is a very good answer for your acts. Very, very good. My daughter, one who is in my will and does her, the book says things, it means acts, A-C-T-S. Does her acts because I want it, does not need to dispose her intentions herself. In other words, just do the act and trust him. Since she is in my will, as she operates, prays, suffers, I myself dispose these things as I best please. Isn't that better? Mm-hmm. That's like saying to a small child, just put your penny into the little piggy bank. And, you know, when the little piggy bank is fat enough and all the rest of it, then Mummy will help you to decide what to do with it as best. Is that okay? Instead of saying, I put that penny in for this and I put the other halfpenny in for that and all the rest of it, which it's too small. Whereas somebody else knows what to do with the whole thing. So the next paragraph is about doing his will because he wants it. My daughter, Jesus said, one who is in my will, and, oh sorry, I've said that, haven't I? So I myself dispose these things as I best please. Do I like reparation? I place them as reparation. Do I like love? I place them as love. Being the owner, you see, we're one with him, so he owns our acts. I do with them whatever I want. Not so for those who are not in my will. They are the ones who dispose, and I comply with their will. So somebody not living in the divine will says, Lord, I'm saying this rosary for this reason. So he says, okay. But if you're living in the divine will and the two of you are doing it together and you are one with him and he is one with you, then he disposes because he knows best. That's okay with me, is it with you? I think that simplifies things hugely. But we like telling God what to do. We would find it very discomforting if we couldn't tell him, I want you to do this and I want you to do that and I want you to do it because. Like, I want you to save my aunt because she was a very good person. He knows her better than you do. He actually died for her, you didn't. Do you know what I mean? So he created her, he redeemed her, he sanctified her, and he took her to himself. And there's a little miserable me telling him what to do. So it's beginning to see it from his point of view is good. Another day, Luisa said, having read a book about a female saint who first had almost no need of food and then needed to feed herself very often, her necessity being such that she reached the point of crying if they wouldn't give her something. I remained concerned, thinking about my state, since once I used to take very little food and I was forced to bring it up. And now I take more and I don't bring it up. So this is the first time we know that she reached a point of being able to retain any food. And she's as I was saying this, blessed Jesus, what is this? I consider this as my lack of mortification. This is my badness that leads me to these miseries. And Jesus said, what are you talking about? Do you want to know why this is happening? I want to make you content, he said. At the beginning, that's at the beginning of their relationship. In order to make the soul completely my own, to empty her of all that is sensible, and to place in her all that is celestial and divine, I detach her, even from the necessity of food, in such a way that she almost doesn't need it. Now notice the almost. So, finding herself in this condition, she touches with her own hand that Jesus alone is enough. God alone suffices. That nothing is necessary for her anymore. And the soul rises high, she despises everything, she cares for nothing else, her life is celestial. So the Lord has done this to establish her in this high place. So the job's done. I mean, if you do your leaving certificate, you have your certificate in your hand, you're not going back to school to do another one, are you? No, the job's done. You might go on to university to do more learning, okay. So after I have established her well for years and years, look at the thing. Different plants grow at different paces, don't they? No longer fearing that what is sensible might cause her even a shadow of an impression, because after the soul has tasted the heavenly, it's almost impossible that she might appreciate dregs and dung, and you need to add in the word anymore. So if you've tasted the celestial, you won't get back the taste for raw snails and stuff. So when she reaches this stage, I give her back to ordinary life. So you eat and drink like everybody else. Because I want my children to take part in the things created by me for love of them, according to my will, not their own. Now that actually is a very important statement. Because if you read about people who lived on the Eucharist all their lives, you might say, oh, God, I'll never make it, you know what I mean? I couldn't do that even for 2 days, you know what I mean? The point is, you don't have to. He says, I want my children to take part in the things created by me for love of them. I'd colour that if you had a colour. But to do it according to his will. You eat to live, you don't live to eat. People in the world can live to eat. And it is only for love of these children, that is of the divine will understood, that I am forced to feed the others. Not only this, but to see these celestial children. Now these celestial children is Romans 8:19. The sons of God. But to see these celestial children take the necessary things with sacrifice, with detachment, that means you're not doing it for self-indulgence, and according to my will, is for me the most beautiful reparation for all those who use the natural things not according to my will. So here he's saying, you take the food that's necessary for your body and eat the food cooked properly and nicely so that it is attractive and everything, and do it in his will, and it becomes reparation for all the ones who are destroying themselves by the misuse of food. Isn't that wonderful? So how can you say there's badness for you in this? Not at all. What's wrong with taking in my will a little more or a little less of dregs? Dregs means it only belongs to the earth, it doesn't belong to heaven. Nothing. In my will there can be nothing evil, but always good, even in the most insignificant things. Isn't that lovely?
Yes.
Now I'll do one more with you for tonight. So we'll do October the 14th, 1912. Everything that Jesus does in souls is eternal. Notice the word everything. I like that word if it's eternal, don't you? Finding myself in my usual state, I was lamenting and so on. And then she tells him everything is over. So let's come to Jesus' message. Jesus said, my daughter, what are you saying? Nothing does you good. Everything is over. That is false. You are deceiving yourself. We're very good at that, and that's why gathering together to understand writings like this and what Jesus is saying and sharing together is actually very good. Nothing is over and everything does you good. You must know that everything I do to the soul is sealed with the seal of eternity, and you'll find it in heaven, every good thought, word, action, and everything else. And there is no power that can take the work of my grace away from the soul. For that, I want to give you Romans 8, verses 35 to 39. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing at all.
Romans 8, verses
35 to 39. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Only ourselves can do it. So, everything I have done for your soul, everything exists and has life in you, and it gives you continuous nourishment. So, if I crucified you, the crucifixion still exists. You need to add the word still in. The crucifixion still exists. And it exists for as many times as I have crucified you, because it was done in the divine will. Many times I delight in operating in souls and putting my work in storage. And then I renew my work without taking away what I've done before. Therefore, how can you say that nothing does you good and that everything is over? You see, Luisa was talking about her feelings, and Jesus is telling her facts. Ah, my daughter, the times are so sad, this is 1912, that my justice reaches the point of rejecting the souls who take the lightnings upon themselves, preventing them from falling upon the world. Now, the times are so bad that my justice reaches the point of rejecting the souls who take the lightnings upon themselves. They're the victim souls. The victim souls try to take the justice upon themselves to spare the world. But Jesus is saying the world is so bad that it would kill the victim souls and it wouldn't do the world any good. So then he takes away the suffering from the victim's souls and gets them to do something else. These are the dearest victims of my heart, and the world forces me to keep them almost idle. But this is not their idleness, because being in my will, while it seems that they do nothing, they do everything. Even more, they embrace immensity and eternity, because the divine will is eternal, infinite, perfect, and eternal. Do you remember? But the world, because of its wickedness, does not enjoy these effects of his. So Luisa has to learn at this moment something that's you'll find in the poem written by Milltown on his blindness. Don't know if you remember the poem from school.
I remember it, but I don't remember the words.
When I consider how my
yes,
life half spent, yeah, and half my years and all the rest of it.
Yes.
And then he says, God does not need either man's work or his own gifts. He has thousands at his bidding, speed and post, or land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. That's what Louise is learning. If the divine will has you doing zero at this moment, that zero is everything. If he has you carrying a cross at this moment, if the divine will has it, then that cross is everything. If he has you enjoying a meal with a friend at this moment in the divine will, that's everything. It's the divine will that's everything. So I leave it there for tonight.